So when I saw my career ending, because I could kind of see that my career was not going, my television career was not going to sustain me until I was like 60. It just wasn't. I thought I would be a teacher, and I taught for a couple semesters at a college out here, and just was so unhappy, Jacob. Oh my God, it was not a good fit for me. And then I found this thing called corporate training, and literally in the first, I don't know, couple years, somebody said to me, "Would you work one-on-one with our division presidents?" And actors never say no. Whether they know what they're doing or not, actors never say no. And so I said, sure, I'll work with your presidents, not knowing what I was doing. And I was doing coaching. I mean, that's it. I was suddenly coaching. So I've been coaching a long time.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of The Future of Work with Jacob Morgan. My guest today is Tom Henschel. He is an actor, coach, and he's also the host of the Look and Sound of Leadership podcast. Tom, thank you for joining me.
Well, thank you for having me. It's great to be with you, Jacob.
Today's topic is going to be all about executive presence and why it's so important, and actually how to create executive presence. It's not a topic I've actually covered on this show, so I'm looking forward to it. But you have a pretty interesting and diverse background, so I thought maybe we could start with a little bit of information about you, because you did a bunch of acting. I wanted to be an actor for the longest time.
Did you?
Yeah, I mean, I was an extra in some things. When I was in high school and middle school, I did a bunch of plays, and I was, really into that for a long time. And I don't know why I didn't end up going down that direction, but hey, you know what? As a speaker and content creator, I kind of bring some of that to what I do anyway.
Well, and I'll bet all that kind of preference when you were young makes you a pretty comfortable speaker, right?
Yeah. I mean, I did have to speak and present and act in front of large groups of people, oftentimes doing things that made me very, very uncomfortable. So I suppose that's true.
Yeah.
So what about you? How did you get involved in what you're doing now? How'd you get involved with acting?
Well, the acting part came first. So I was that same kid as you in school. I was in a school district that had lots of arts, and I was always in the plays. And then I got to go to Juilliard right out of high school when Juilliard just started its drama program. So this is a long time ago now. And then I graduated with my union card, and I worked in television and theater for, I don't know, into my 40s.
Wow.
And then I found this career around coaching and training.
Well, Juilliard, I mean, for those who don't know, I think it's not the world's top acting and theater program in the world.
It's one of them, yeah, for sure. And we all know so many people now who went to Juilliard and won Academy Awards and won Tony Awards. So yeah, it's a great school.
Super cool. And so how did you get from the acting into leadership stuff? Because I see some similarities, but they're also pretty different.
They are. The connection for me, really, Jacob, was always around teaching. When I was in high school, I taught others. In high school, I even taught junior high school, believe it or not. That was so weird. I taught through Juilliard. I've always taught. When I came to Hollywood, I taught at a conservatory. So when I saw my career ending, because I could kind of see that my career was not going my television career was not going to sustain me until I was like 60. It just wasn't. I thought I would be a teacher, and I taught for a couple semesters at a college out here, and just was so unhappy, Jacob. Oh my God, it was not a good fit for me. And then I found this thing called corporate training, and literally in the first, I don't know, couple years, somebody said to me, "Would you work one-on-one with our division presidents?" And actors never say no. Whether they know what they're doing or not, actors never say no. And so I said, sure, I'll work with your presidents, not knowing what I was doing. And I was doing coaching. I mean, that's it. I was suddenly coaching. So I've been coaching a long time.
Wow. Yeah. And executive presence is a huge topic and a very crucial one. So why don't we start off with what is executive presence? Because you do a lot of coaching on that. So what is it, and why do you think it's so important for leaders today?
Boy, what is it? Listen, I'm going to guess you have opinions about this too. I'm going to guess every one of your listeners has an opinion about what executive presence is, right? And one of the things that I've found is it is not uniform.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, picture this. I literally, this happened to me one day. I'm based in Los Angeles, so I coach at a lot of the movie studios just because that's one of the big businesses here. So one morning I'm at Warner Brothers coaching this guy. But Warner Brothers, he's a senior executive, but he deals with creatives all day long, right? It's a creative community at Warner Brothers. I go from there, and after lunch I'm down at this financial capital group that has, I don't know, $1 billion in assets. Those executive presence in those two places felt really different.
Hmm.
And they were both effective in their places, but they were really different. Uh, do you have that sense where executive presence isn't kind of, I don't know, how do you experience it?
Yeah. I suppose it depends on the industry that you're in. I mean, when I think of executive presence, I think of, I don't know, somebody who walks into the room and they command the room, not from like a authority perspective, but they just have a presence of being both approachable, but at the same time also like an approachable leader, somebody who you kind of trust. You know that they're capable of making decisions. You know that they can get their point across, but somebody who's also very approachable that you can come talk to. So I'm trying to imagine like an example of a real person. I mean, I've interviewed, for example, a lot of CEOs on my podcast, like
Yeah.
Hubert Joly, for example, the CEO of Best Buy, or the former CEO of Best Buy. He retired recently, and he, I think, has a very, very strong executive presence where you talk to him and he's making jokes and he's friendly and you kind of, you could see yourself grabbing coffee with him or grabbing a drink with him. But at the same time, when he talks about business, you're kind of like, wow, this guy knows his stuff. Like he has the presence of when he talks, I'm going to listen. So I don't know. It's kind of hard to
Interesting.
put my finger on exactly what it is.
You named a whole bunch of stuff in there that I would
Yeah.
love to tease out. No, no, no. Because, so listen, Jacob, I've been talking to people about executive presence for as long as I've been coaching.
Yeah.
And I think of it as having two different kind of pieces to it, one of which is behavioral, and the other which we might call, I don't know, attitude or kind of your wiring. And you talked about confidence. Actually, you used the words command the room. Um, so can I point you to a study that I found really, really interesting about executive presence?
Of
So
course.
there used to be this group called the Center for Talent Innovation. They've renamed themselves now to CoQual.
Hmm.
They're run by a woman named Sylvia Ann Hewlett. She's been there. She started as an economist, but now she's a researcher. And they did, I don't know, probably 10 years or so ago, they did this study on executive presence. They interviewed 4,000 people in Fortune 100 companies, and it didn't matter what level you were at, but you had to be a college graduate to participate. And they asked them, what's executive presence? One of the qualities that got called out was the exact phrase you used, command the room. The ability to command the room.
Hmm.
And that involves what she identified as, quote, great speaking skills. And yeah, I think that's um, that's a set of behaviors.
Hmm.
And great speaking skills can be taught and learned.
So is it just speaking skills or is it also body language? Is it appearance? Is it a bunch of different things?
So can I give you her model and tell you
Yeah, yeah.
this? Great. So she identified gravitas as the big one. Like 69% of executive presence is some part of gravitas, which has to do with confidence, the ability to command a room. It's uh, you know, it's funny. I was on a call. Can I tell you a quick story?
I love stories. Yes.
Oh, cool. So as a coach, I do what are called chemistry calls, where an executive is going to interview two, three, or four coaches and pick one. So I was on a chemistry call yesterday, and I've read a little bit about this woman. I don't know much about her. I know a little bit about her, but I have no idea who I'm going to see. And to me, it's, by the way, speaking of acting, it's just another audition, right? It's like, I know how to audition. Auditions are fine with me. I don't care. I'm always going to have a good time. I'm on a call with this woman. She pops onto my screen. I've never seen her before. I'm suddenly in her room and seeing this woman up close. And in the first, I don't know, 60 to 90 seconds, Jacob, it was completely clear to me that this woman had gravitas.
Hmm.
She was completely confident in herself. There was nothing about her that was fear-based. She was happy for me to look at her. She didn't mind being judged. If I was going to be a hater, she didn't really care. She was just completely present, and it was great. And I could get it literally right away. Um, that sense of gravitas. I thought she had it. And that might be part of what you were talking about with the guy from Best Buy. I'm not sure.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it also seems, I guess, like some of executive presence is a little bit subjective. I don't,
Yeah.
like what I think would be executive presence might not be the same for somebody else.
But I think that goes back to that idea of, Warner Brothers versus the Capital Management
Yeah.
Group, right? Different situations and yeah. Although I do think, I don't know, I think that mm, there's 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 a consensus around people that we are attracted to. You
Yeah.
think of somebody who's just incredibly charismatic. I don't know if we would all pick different people. Tony Robbins, Brene
Yeah.
Brown, whoever it might be, where you just go, I love watching this person,
Yeah.
right? I mean, that's a certain kind of executive presence, but it's different than what you were talking about with this CEO leader.
Yeah. So for people who are listening or watching, why is executive presence so important to have? I mean, do you need it if you want to be in a leadership position?
Wow. Do you need it? No. I think executive presence is one of those things that will not get you promoted, nor will it keep you in your job, but I think it will keep you from getting the next job. I think it could
Hmm.
keep you from moving forward. And it's particularly true, Jacob, if you're a woman or if you're a person of color.
Hmm.
If you are a woman without executive presence or a person of color without executive presence, the hill is much steeper.
Yeah.
Will it ultimately get you that job? No. No, but you can't get there without it, or it's harder without it.
Yeah. And what happens, and I don't know if you've seen this from some of the people that you've coached, if you get to a leadership position but you don't have that executive presence, I mean, I would imagine, for example, it's a little bit harder to motivate, engage, empower people to communicate your vision, to get things done.
Yeah. Oh, I think it absolutely can be. Sure, but think about if I'm going to work with a leader who I feel does not have gravitas or confidence, yeah, it will be hard for me to follow that leader. Sure. So I do think it is hard. I think it's hard. One of the things that this is a kind of big concept that I think can really be helpful for people to think about executive presence and how they might want to develop themselves to get it. To think about the fact that you won't always know what's working for you. You are going to need feedback.
Hmm.
It's going to be a requirement for you to
Yeah.
get feedback. But then I go, think about all the things that are required in actually getting good feedback over time, which, by the way, may mean years. You need to be non-defensive, which means you need to have some confidence. You need to be able to be a good listener, which means you have to have great speaking skills. I mean, the act of committing to getting really good feedback over a long period of time is, I think, in itself the development of executive presence.
Hmm. Yeah. And feedback is not something that everybody's comfortable with either.
No kidding, right? It's hard. I mean,
Yeah.
listen, as an actor, I got feedback publicly, and that was a challenge for me. But what's been really interesting is for me as an executive coach is delivering feedback, Jacob, and watching different people's capacity to take it in.
Hmm. Do you think a lot of leaders struggle with executive presence?
Struggle? No. It is what I coach on. I
Hmm.
think people work to develop it. Um, Struggle? I don't know.
Or they
Can
don't
again,
have it
can
maybe?
Well, certainly, I think again, if executive presence is multifaceted, then I think it is inevitable that you, as a leader, will be missing some part of it. You'll be stronger in others and need development in. So, can I tell you a story about a guy?
Yes. Stories I love.
Okay, so this guy is leading an enormous business at a chip manufacturer. These people create certain chips that go in They're in your home, I promise. They are in your phone, I promise. I mean, this guy leads a great big business, but he got there because he's really technical. And he can think at a very high level about the technology, but he is now running a huge business for this company. And the board of directors wants to hear from him at every
Hmm.
board meeting. And he's having trouble communicating at the right level for the board. That's a executive presence problem,
Hmm.
right? He can't get the right altitude for his audience. And I think it's hard. I think the whole concept of altitude it can be a struggle for certain leaders, and it's a challenge for this guy. Yeah, it's really interesting to watch him learn it. He's getting there. It's hard.
So when you say altitude, what does that actually mean?
It's about where you think about the work. So can I give you an analogy?
Yes.
This is one that I think we all now know, which is think about looking at your property on a map on your phone. And you can zoom in and you can see the cars parked on the street, right? You can see the walkway that leads up to your house. That's, I think, the altitude, quote unquote, that most of us do our work at,
Hmm.
right? We're doing the work every day. And so when someone says, how's your work going? What you want to talk about is the walkway and the car and the sidewalk, because that's kind of what you're thinking about. Your boss does not care about that stuff. That's the beginning of altitude, right? So your boss is now seeing kind of thoroughfares. Great. But that person's boss is seeing arteries and landscape and how counties connect, right? It's hard, I think, for the person who's been working on the driveway to think up at kind of county level
Hmm.
altitude. It's a challenge for people to think up. But I do think it gives you executive presence. I think it's great to try and think at your boss's level about your own work. Try and think of your boss's level about your own work.
It reminds me of so I interviewed the CEO of IDEO a little while ago, Tim Brown, and he was telling me about this video, which is on YouTube. Anybody can watch it. I think it's from the 80s. It's called The Powers of 10. I don't know if you've ever seen this, but it's a video, and it starts off showing a couple, and you just see them on a picnic blanket on a little thing of grass. And then it zooms out, and you see the whole park. And then it zooms out again, and you see that around the park there's cars, and you see neighborhoods. Then it zooms out again, and you see the city. Zooms out again, country. Zooms out again. So you kind of get the idea. It keeps zooming out up until the point where you're like in galaxies, right? Looking at many planets.
Fantastic.
And then it does the exact opposite, where it shows them sitting on a picnic blanket, and then it zooms in, and you see like the person's hand, and then it goes to atoms, to molecules, to so it's
Wow.
and I love the analogy. And what Tim told me is that really what makes a great leader is you have to have the ability to focus on the powers of 10, to zoom out and see the big picture, but also to be able to zoom in to see exactly what's going on. And so that really made me think of kind of what you're saying.
Yes, it sounds very much the same. Oh, that is so cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, to put altitude on that, yeah.
Powers of 10.
Galaxies.
Yeah, so anybody can look that up. Powers of 10 on YouTube. It's a great video.
I will, believe me, you know what I'm doing as soon as we get off this call.
It's a little old.
Absolutely.
It's an old video, but it's worth watching. Okay, so at least for this particular leader, it sounds like he struggled with being able to kind of zoom out a little bit and to communicate that. What are some of the other common areas that you think leaders have a hard time with or need to work on when we think of executive presence?
So, one that I think is particularly true among women is making statements as questions.
Hmm.
I'm on a call the other day with a woman. This is a PhD. She does huge analytics for Amazon. And she and I were talking about an idea. And I was like, great. Can you, I'm endorsing this idea of hers, like going, great, can you go into that meeting and actually ask for that? I'm not sure that I didn't plant the idea of asking, but I said, how would that sound in that meeting? And she turned it into a question. And I was like, wait, why is it a question all of a sudden?
Hmm.
And we then talked for probably 10 minutes about the fact she was like, Oh my God, I do that all the time. I take my statements and turn them into questions. And you know what? I think it's why people don't take me seriously, she said.
It's a good one. I like that one a
Isn't
lot.
it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Huh. All right. Now I want to unpack a couple more of these. So I like this. So, um, statements into questions, being able to zoom out, think big picture. What are some other things that you coach people on?
One of the things that I coach people on is, get this, short sounds confident.
Hmm.
And you hear it, right? I mean, it's completely clear what I'm saying.
Yeah.
But it is hard to do. It is really hard to do. By the way, especially if you're at the sidewalk driveway level, it's hard to not talk about the next brick. But yeah, short sounds confident. It's hard to stop talking. And by the way, I'm doing it right now. I'm continuing to talk, but I know you understand me.
Well, for a podcast, it's good. I want you to keep talking.
It's funny, I got a letter from a listener of my podcast recently with just this question about how do I be more concise? And it is hard. And Jacob, I listen to people for a living. Again, in a coaching conversation, I want them talking, but then like I'll shadow them into their meetings. And it's like, wow, they are using way too many words and I can't even follow them. So short sounds confident, but it's hard work, if you think about it, to formulate your thinking as you're speaking, to stop talking at the end of a paragraph, to look to others like what comes next? Do you hold the ball and are you going to a new topic? Do you throw the ball to somebody else? Like it takes a really active kind of thinking about what you're communicating, and that mentally is really hard work. And some people develop that skill slowly.
Hmm.
Um, uh,
Yeah,
Go ahead.
I think a lot of people are uncomfortable with silence, with just space. And so whenever we hear that, we're kind of like, oh God, it's 3 seconds. Nobody has said anything. Like I gotta jump in. Let me ask another question, add another comment, throw something else in there so it's not weird.
Yes. So I got two quick things about that. Number one is leaders who feel compelled to speak in meetings as if they have to hold the ball. And that's like, it's a very interesting thing when I see that. I'm like, you can like just hand the ball off. You don't have to keep talking. Or do you? Because if you do, then what does that mean about your team, right? Like, why are you still talking? So that's one thing. On a totally different thing, I told a story about I was going to stop coaching someone, and I went to that person's boss, and she literally basically said to me, she said, "So you're going to stop coaching him?" And then she like didn't speak again for a long time. And it was the most interesting. She was completely comfortable with whatever I said, but she was not going to pick the ball up. And I filled the silence very slowly. It was really interesting the longer she stayed silent. And I went, this is an amazing executive Jedi mind trick. You know, it just works. It's
Yeah.
incredible.
Well, are there any other? So I think we talked about three so far. Are there any others that you want to bring up that you think people need to be aware of?
Oh my gosh, Jacob, I could go all day on this. This is what I do for a living.
All right.
Yeah, you want me to keep going?
Yeah, this is great because I think what it'll help with is people who are watching or listening to this when they're thinking of developing their own executive presence, these stories of keeping things concise, of being able to think big picture, making sure their statements are not questions. You know, these things add up, and I think it'll help everybody watching and listening develop their own executive presence. So yeah, if you have a couple more, by all means.
Oh my gosh. Okay. By the way, that was a great recap that you just did. So nice
I
job.
try to remember all of them.
Yeah, no, that's great. Uh, and by the way, that's an executive presence skill is listening. The fact that you could listen, you know, while we're doing this conversation together and you're hearing this stuff for the first time, the fact that you can capture that, you clearly have taught your brain how to capture information. That in itself is an executive presence thing. When I think about great communication skills, going back to Sylvia and Hewlett, right? Um, yeah, great speaking skills, I think includes listening. So, yay, good job. Well done. Um, okay, so that was one, but here's another. Um, Hold on. I just need to grab my thought because it flew. Oh, okay. One of the things that I think executives have to do all the time is answer questions. I mean, right? They just do. I think most people answer what they want to answer and do not answer the question. They
Hmm.
do not answer what's asked. Have you ever been deposed,
Hmm.
you, Jacob?
I don't think so.
Have you
No.
ever heard what it's like to be trained to be deposed?
Yes, I've seen some movies.
And yeah, and like, what do they tell you to do if you're going about to be deposed?
Um,
Can
I
you
don't know.
remember?
Answer the questions.
Yes, that's exactly right. Answer what they ask. So if they ask you, when were you at the store? You don't tell them where you were before or after. And you don't tell them what you were in the store for. And you don't tell them anything. You tell them, you answer what's asked.
Hmm.
That's a really hard executive presence thing to do. Answer what's asked because I think, actually, Jacob, I think most people hear almost every question as an essay question, you know? And they just think they have license to speak, especially executives. I have to say, executives think they're being paid by the word. And I get that, by the way. They're carrying enormous burdens, and when people invite them to talk, they have a lot to say. That's fine. But answer what's asked. So, three of the questions we use with each other in English. Hold on, wait. Let me start that a little differently. There are only four kinds of questions in English. Three of them are all closed-ended. And the fourth one is an essay. But only one out of four is an essay, right? So if you want to develop executive presence, just start listening for the difference,
Hmm.
right? Um, and to just quickly name the three so people aren't wondering what that is, the three closed-ended questions are yes, no, multiple choice. Wow, the third one just went out of my head. Can um, I will get it. I'm sorry, Jacob. That was
No worries.
weird. I've been talking about this forever and I can't remember. Anyway, so of these three, when I ask them to, if I'm the asker, right, and you are going to have executive presence and answer appropriately, if I ask you, can we make those numbers? My slot is open. In my head, I've got a slot that needs a yes or a no.
Hmm.
If you're going to answer with an essay, I'm going to stop listening pretty soon. It's like you're trying to shove a mattress into my slot and it doesn't fit in there. It's not right. And so it starts to close up. And I want to say for executives, people often stop listening to you if you're not answering
Yeah.
what's asked. Yeah.
Well, I see this all the time, just even with friends and family members. You ask them a question, and instead of answering the question, they they go off on some crazy tangent. It's like, what do you think of that book? Well, the other day I was sitting watching this show, and I'm like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Let's take a step back there, buddy. It's not what I asked you. Or sometimes I'll ask people, even sometimes members of my team, I'll come up with a piece of content or I'll come up with a title for an article or something, and I'll say, hey, what do you think of this title? And then they'll respond to my question with a question of, well, what are you trying to convey? I'm like, no, no, no. Just this is this is a title. What good, bad? You read the article. What? So yeah, I think people in general have a hard time just answering the question that you ask.
Yeah, they absolutely can. And we talk about what's important to us. And so, again, I think leaders who want to do it answer what's asked. But it leads to one more skill that I talk about with people all the time.
Hmm.
Um, so people often get lost in their thinking. Again, I don't know if you have witnessed this. I witness this a lot where I'll ask a question and people will start talking. And again, think about what I'm doing in the room. I'm a coach. I'm there to listen, and that's all good. But I can tell that they are drifting in a way that has no connection to what we were talking about. And so with those people, I'm working with one guy right now. And he's so willing. But what I got an agreement to play a game with him, Jacob. And here's the agreement. Here's what I basically said. I said, may I play? What are we talking about right now? That's the game. what are we talking about right now? That at any time when you are talking, I say to this guy, I get to put up my finger, stop you, and say, what are we talking about right now? And the game is for you, the speaker, to get to the highest level of hierarchy possible,
Hmm.
like that you would get to the first level folder. And I want to tell you, Jacob, it happens all the time. And it becomes kind of funny at a certain point, like, oh my God, people get lost in their thoughts and have no idea what they were talking about. Literally none. They cannot retrace their steps. They were truly unconscious of their own path. That is not executive presence, right? It's
Yeah.
just not.
Yeah, that's pretty funny. So for people who are listening or watching, how can you tell if you have executive presence? I mean, does somebody come up to you and say, "Hey, you got executive presence"?
I think you get feedback over time. I think you get given opportunities to be in front of others. Because, by the way, if you exude executive presence, this may have happened to you when you were young because you were used to being on stage and you were used to doing all that, right? That people would then invite you to do other things because you had presence. And I think that's what happens. And so you start to get feedback because people are watching you.
Yeah.
So I think that's how you ultimately know is over years, you've heard it.
Yeah. And so I suppose the feedback that you get is around a set of different criteria, right? Oh, you're a good speaker, you're a good listener, you're a good communicator. Like those are the types of things that you would probably, or emotionally intelligent maybe is another one.
Right, all those things. And again, you're going to get, I hope, balanced feedback that says, you are really great making connections with people when you speak. We can't always hear the ends of your sentences,
Hmm.
right? And you would get, I hope you get rich feedback where you also get stuff to work on because nobody's got all those things that you just listed.
Yeah.
We're all in development, right? So, yeah. Listen, I have a guy who literally just his diction is terrible. People cannot understand what he says.
And he's a leader.
Well, he's managing people. He would
Yeah.
like to be a larger leader, but he's managing people. And literally, like, oh my gosh. And it gets worse on video. It's like, yeah. So then either people get embarrassed about, like, I'm sorry, can you repeat yourself? Or they
Hmm.
think they know what he said and they guess at it. It's like, ooh, that's an executive presence problem, right?
Yeah. Well, actually, I wanted to ask you a little bit about the virtual setting, because as a result of COVID, a lot of leaders, a lot of employees in general, are or have been in a virtual setting, and even though I think a lot of people will end up going back to the office, I think we're going to have much more flexible environments where some of your time will certainly be virtual, and so you're going to need to get more comfortable leading and communicating and collaborating in a virtual world. So, do you have any thoughts on developing executive presence in a virtual world where you're just looking at a screen and talking into a microphone?
Yeah, boy. Listen, I'm going to guess again that every one of your listeners has thoughts about this, both in terms of
Yeah.
what they've seen that looks good and what they've seen that's horrible, or their own self-consciousness around it. I mean, I don't know. I heard recently a psychologist talk about video fatigue, and he said, which I thought was interesting, I had not thought of this before, is that one of the reasons we get fatigued is because we are seeing ourselves
Hmm.
all day long, and
Interesting.
that has a kind of energy suck to it. Yeah, I heard that and I was like, wow, uh, okay. But I do think that communicating on video is different. I still think
Yeah.
things like short sound confident are going to transcend. But then there's also the video piece of it. So, for example, I'm talking to someone about doing a presentation skills training for his team over video, which is not like the old days, right? I mean, it's not like I'm going to walk in with a video camera and we're going to do video feedback. It doesn't work that way on video, on virtual.
Yep.
But um, here's what he said was the challenge for his team is they have to present to the CEO, who is a very smart man. And he said, look, the instant they put up a slide, he's read it and is ready for the next slide. He's not listening anymore.
Hmm.
And he said it didn't happen the same way in a room. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
In a boardroom where the expanse was bigger. But he said the CEO in some ways has the opportunity to kind of gather information differently and move on. And what a problem that is. That's an interesting challenge to have of how fast do you dispense information to other people on video? How close do you actually want to be to your camera, right? Because it really is like I'm very close to you. All those things I think are hard, and what I am finding is they are not the same in every culture.
Hmm.
That's what I'm finding is different teams run their videos differently, which is interesting. There's one team that I work with, Jacob. I don't know if you've seen this, where one of the members of the team, kind of like a secretary, is actually managing the call and putting people on Spotlight and taking them off Spotlight,
Hmm.
or managing the screen share, so that, like, by the way, the call that I was on, she did not let slides burn for very long. She would put up a slide, the person would be talking, and she would take it down pretty fast so we could watch the person. And I was like, oh, that's really interesting. I
Hmm.
was, that the sharing was going on and off and on and off. So I think there's lots of ways to manage it and be creative, to kind of think like a filmmaker.
Hmm. And it's interesting because I think there's even some stuff in a virtual or having a virtual executive presence that most people don't even think of in person. For example, having a good quality microphone, having a good quality camera. I've attended or have seen some meetings and sessions delivered by executives who in person have an amazing executive presence. They're great at commanding the room. They have that gravitas, but they're delivering a virtual all hands meeting to their team. And they have this, the shades are open behind them. So there's a big bright light behind them. So they appear as a silhouette. They're a little blurry. Maybe they're using a regular laptop mic, so you can't hear everything super clear. And the message and that entire executive presence is just totally lost because all you see in front of you is somebody who is not adept at using technology to get their message across. And I think it hurts the leader dramatically. It hurts the team as well.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think the lighting thing is a big thing, Jacob. As young actors, what we were taught was if you are not standing in your light with light on your face, the audience cannot hear you.
Hmm.
That's what young actors get taught. And by the way, it's true. And there's a whole thing in the theater where their actors are told, quote, find your light. And what it means, you feel literally the heat of the light in your eyes, but it's not in your eye line. You have to feel it. Well, it's amazing how many people do not have any idea what it means to find your light. And so their face is in shadow, and it actually is harder to hear them. It's harder to
Yeah.
understand them because we can't see their lips anymore.
Yep.
By the way, it's one of the problems with masks, right? Is that children cannot see our lips, so they often cannot understand us in the same way.
Yeah. Yeah. That's interesting. The other thing that I think is interesting is what if people are introverted? I mean, does executive presence favor extroverts more than introverts, or can you be a leader with executive presence even though you're introverted?
I hope you can. I hope you can find a way. I have worked with this and talked about this with many people over the years, Jacob, and some people suffer with it, and some people kind of tolerate with it, but it's not always easy.
Mm-hmm.
So I do think you can do it, and I think what powerful introverts find out is that it takes a kind of game day attitude, that you get up for it, you do it, you let go of it when it's over, and it's going to take some effort. It's not going to happen automatically. So for you and I, who have a different kind of energy, perhaps, right, as extroverts, I'm assuming you're an extrovert. I don't know if that's true, but I think based on the fact that you wanted to be in theater when you were young, I'm guessing you were an extrovert, but maybe not. Yeah. So, I think it's different for those people where they have to kind of manufacture it, but the leaders that I see who are very successful, and by the way, I'm thinking particularly of women now, who also are introverts, they have made the choice that it's not a gender thing, it's not a victim thing.
Hmm.
It's really a choice for them. Like, okay, I know this is what it takes. This is what I'm going to do. And they do it.
Yeah.
And then they let it go when it's over.
Hmm. Yeah, I like that.
I hope you can.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Do you have any tips on how to make your presence unique? Like, how do you stand out with your executive presence so it's not just like somebody else's?
Wow, what an interesting problem. That would never occur to me because how could my executive presence not be unique, right? I mean, it's
Yeah.
always going to be mine,
Yeah,
right?
maybe it's a bad question.
No, no, no. The question that I actually think it leads to, I'm serious. The question that I think it leads to is confidence
Hmm.
that your executive presence is good enough. Your executive presence is what you want. And to find the words that you can actually name it to people. Like when you work with me, I'm this, right?
Hmm.
So I think it's a great question. Is like, I think here's what I'm wanting to help people understand. The awareness of your uniqueness can help you have executive presence. Trying to kind of adapt it, I think, is not effective. It
Hmm.
makes us feel out of balance, or it's adaptive behavior. It's not natural behavior.
Yeah.
I think maybe when you're young, maybe.
Are there any leaders um, or personalities out there that you think have a great executive presence that maybe those listening or watching might be familiar with?
Oh,
I don't know, like Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk. Do any of those guys have executive presence?
sure. Yeah, they do. And look, one of the things that I love about it is they are all different. I mean, if you look from Elon Musk to Tim Cook, like really? Like and everybody may not be to your taste, but yes, they are all clearly in full command and awareness of their own self.
Hmm.
They are putting forward a very intentional persona. At that level, again, anybody who's been doing earning calls for that long has to learn how to do them in an effective way, right? That you can't just, you have to say the script, but you have to read the script well. And to be honest, Jacob, that is a really hard skill. I mean, look, that's what people win Academy Awards for, right?
Yeah.
It is hard, but it means that you get trained, you learn to manage yourself, you learn to be self-aware, you learn to do things differently, you get very conscious of what you're doing and not self-conscious. You build it as a muscle and as a skill. And I think, again, going back to Sylvia Ann Hewlett's model, this idea that gravitas, that's a set of attitudes you can develop. And by the way, I don't know if I ever said number two and three. Number two is communication. It's all those great speaking skills. That's all just behavior, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think they all have it in their own way.
And
I
what
don't know if that
was
was helpful. I was not trying to avoid
no, it was. And what was number three? So gravitas, communication, and the third one is
appearance, which
okay.
is a teeny little sliver. And this is, again, one of those where appearance by itself isn't going to get you the job, but if you don't have it, you cannot have executive presence.
Hmm. So let's unpack appearance a little bit. Does that just mean wearing a nice suit?
No, I mean, no, I don't think it's necessarily about how much you spend on your wardrobe. I don't know if that's what you meant. Um, no, I think appearance is really reading what's appropriate. A lot of times managers talk about young employees needing to be told the quote unquote dress code,
Mm-hmm.
although we don't have a dress code here at work. And it's somebody who's just like is not looking around and picking up on the cue. Now, I'll tell you the hilarious version of this. Oh my gosh, I used to coach at a biotech firm where this was a long time ago, where the leader wore Argyle vests. And I coached there over a period of probably 6 or 7 years. By the time I was leaving, like there were Argyle vests everywhere. It was hilarious. Everybody was suddenly wearing Argyle vests like Bill. It's like that was just amazing. So that's one way that appearance can kind of everybody reads the message and everybody takes it on. I don't know that that's a good thing, but having some sense of what's appropriate.
Hmm.
And these days, by the way, where casual, right? Like business casual can mean all kinds of things. Business
Yeah.
casual can mean a black t-shirt some days.
Is appearance also related to posture and how you carry yourself? You know, how you how you walk. You know, do you shuffle your feet? Do you take confident steps? Do you slouch? Do you walk with your shoulders back? Is that a factor of appearance too?
Wow, that was a great list. Oh my God. Everything you described was so behavioral, right? We could all do that or not do that. That was fantastic. So when I think of it as behavior, I put it in the communication bucket, which is number two,
Hmm.
whereas appearance is kind of external. your haircut, grooming, all that stuff.
Yeah.
It really is outwards, which is why it's such a tiny little slice of the pie.
Okay. Got it. All right. So
Yeah, but I
just
loved that list that you did. That was great.
just to recap those, because I think it's great I think it's a great framework of how to tell if you have executive presence. So gravitas, appearance, and communication are kind of like the three broad buckets that we're looking at.
Right. And
Okay.
communication, although you put it last, is actually number two in
Number two.
terms of
Okay.
dimensions, right? So gravitas is kind of the biggest bucket. Communication is next. Appearance is smallest.
And I think communication and appearance people can understand, right? I mean, you can tell if somebody's a great communicator. You can look at someone's appearance. Gravitas, I feel like, is the hard one for a lot of people to wrap their minds around. So, are there like some sub elements or buckets of gravitas that kind of make up that broader bucket that people can think about?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So the first one is always going to be confidence,
Okay.
right? Right. So there, there's a wonderful book called The Confidence Code. Do you know this book? It's
I don't.
it's written by two women journalists who were having very successful careers a- and yet were having struggles with confidence. And they were like, they went on a journalistic journey, exploration to find out what the hell. Like, why were they having this experience? And they found all this social research that was like, yes, women actually have a different experience of confidence than men. And one of the things they found was this thing called NAT, negative automatic thoughts, that women
Hmm.
have. But I don't think it's only women. I think many of us have self-talk that is not helpful. And they talked about in the book, in the Confidence Code, which I think is it's a fun read and it's really helpful. It's got a lot of good tools in it, and it's written for women, so it's great. But this idea of negative automatic thoughts and being able to recognize them and talk back to them and manage them, I think until you can do that, gravitas will be hard and confidence will be hard.
Yeah.
So that's one of the things that I think people can really start to listen for is when that voice goes, that wasn't very good, or you shouldn't be up there, or they don't really want to hear from you, or
Yeah.
oh, can I do a quick exercise with your listeners and you?
Sure.
Ooh, okay, cool. So this is a thought exercise. So I'm guessing, Jacob, I am guessing that you used to stand in front of rooms, maybe on a platform, and speak to a whole lot of people all at once. Am I right?
Back in the day when we could travel.
Right? Okay. So picture yourself on a stage and it's a big event for you. Whatever, the stakes are high. You really want to do well this day. And you're like, I don't know, 7 minutes into your 60 minutes, and some woman in the front row leans under her chair. You cannot not see this, right? She leans under her chair, she gets her purse, slings it over her shoulder, stands up, turns and walks up the center aisle and straight out the room. While you're on stage speaking,
Yeah.
what do you think just happened?
Well, honestly, I've had that happen a lot actually, because
Oh no!
because I mean, some of the events, and I've even been that person too, right? I mean, some of the events I've spoken at, there's thousands of people in there, and it's bound to happen that
Fluid.
somebody's going to need a call, somebody's going to need to go to the restroom, somebody needs to leave to go to a meeting, somebody's had an emergency. So the larger the venue, the more people I think you see moving around. And sometimes I've been that person too, right? I mean, you go listen to a keynote and maybe it doesn't resonate with you. Maybe you need to leave. Maybe you want to get a coffee. I don't know. You're thirsty. Who knows? And you leave because a lot of these sessions, I'm up there talking for an hour.
Right.
And I've definitely had this happen. I think everybody's had this happen. And for me, I think I just see the person, but I don't take it personally. I just say, oh, in my mind, I'm just thinking like somebody's got to go, and that's it.
Great.
Because I mean, I think if
So,
you're up on a stage thinking like, oh, it must have been something I said, maybe I didn't do something right, it's going to derail your talk, and
you know that, Jacob.
can't go down that path.
But well, it's really detrimental if you do. But Jacob,
Yeah.
I don't know if you know, Many more people say that story than your story. I've been asking groups this question for years, and many more people say, she hated me. She couldn't stand being in the room with me. I mean, they do. They say that out
Wow.
loud. Yeah. Now, you and I know that that's not helpful to take it personally.
No.
It's too distracting. And by the way, it's probably not true anyway. But here's my point. Gravitas, confidence, negative automatic thought, that's a negative automatic thought because whatever your audience thought, right? We don't know how your audience is calibrated, how your
Yeah.
listeners are calibrated, but it's like, yeah, many people have that automatic negative thought.
Yeah, and I
Yeah.
think I think the context is important because I mean I've even been in a situation before where I gave a talk. I think this was a few years ago. It was like to like 3,000 people, and then after the session, the company sent me feedback from the speech that I gave,
Ooh,
where they collected survey respondents and whatever they do, and
yeah.
they sent me feedback and they're like, "Oh, Jacob, you got terrible reviews." I think out of the score of 5, I got back like a 2.8 or a 3, something like not great. And I said, "Wow, that's really shocking because a lot of people came up to me after my session and told me how much they enjoyed it." So I said,
Huh.
can you send me the feedback form? Like I want to see the responses. I want to see what people actually wrote, why they gave me negative reviews." So they sent me over the form, and immediately when they sent it over, there were a couple of red flags that popped out. So first, from the 2,500 people who watched, I think only like 50 or 60 people filled out any kind of feedback form. And then I,
Oh, okay.
and then I started to read through the feedback form. Somebody said it was too dark in the room. Somebody said they were upset because they didn't get a break between one session and the next. Somebody said they weren't happy with the food. Somebody said and so the point is that a lot of the feedback that was negative had nothing to do with me. People were
Right.
just
Oh my gosh.
unhappy at the situation or the circumstance or about something else, and it had nothing to do with me as a speaker at the event. And I always remember that story because I think context is so important, not just bad feedback or somebody walked out, but it's really important to understand why. So after I saw
I
that feedback, that changed my perspective on feedback and reviews for just anything in general.
Well, but I just want to tell you the part of that story that really stands out for me, Jacob, is that you advocated for yourself. You didn't simply accept the number. You were like, well, what's here to learn, right? What can
Yeah.
I find out? And so you went towards the feedback instead of away from it. And there again, I just want to say, what an executive presence-like thing to do. That was, I mean, seriously, like that's great that that's what your instinct was, and nice outcome too, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm fine with negative feedback if there's some sort of, context or merit behind it. But if you're mad because you didn't get a chance to go to the restroom, that's nothing to do with me as a presenter. I'm sorry. Um,
Yeah. So can I just echo? This may be obvious, but I want to be really clear that that attitude that you have is this whole thing we've been talking about around confidence. And one of the other ways that it gets described, this gravitas thing, is grace under fire,
hmm,
which it sounds like you understand, right? And not everybody does. A lot of people, I know plenty of leaders who really do not want to be under fire. So when they are under fire, it rattles them. They do not
yeah,
have grace under fire,
yeah,
right? So, yeah, and by the way, the part of the only way you learn to have grace under fire is to be under fire,
hmm,
right? I mean, think about how soldiers get trained. I mean, you know what I mean? It's like at a certain point, they have to use live
yeah,
ammunition, right? It's like, yeah. So that's hard. I mean, who wants to go do that? It's hard to
yeah.
do.
Well, I know we only have a couple of minutes left. So maybe before we wrap up, uh, for people who are watching or listening who are thinking, I want to immediately start improving or working on my executive presence, do you have some action items that people can start right after they're done listening or watching to this? Watching this?
Yes, I do. So one of the things that we all have in our pockets is a filmmaking machine, right?
Yep.
You can, so first off, we're all seeing ourselves on video. You could actually watch, but that's usually not why you're there. But you could make a video of yourself explaining something, whatever. And then don't only watch it alone, because I don't think most of us know how to really be constructive watching ourselves in playback. I think that's a hard skill. But ask 3, 4, 5 people, and here's the question I would ask them. Would you watch this, I don't know, 45-second clip? Would you watch this 90-second clip? And would you send me back 3 words that it evokes? And just that's all you're asking for is 3 words. And see what the consensus is, see where it goes, because it's kind of like you, Jacob, asking for all those feedback forms. Ask for some feedback from others and just watch and see how it goes. And see if you want to adopt those words or change those words over time. If you did one of those a week, I'll bet you would get really good at it.
Yeah. Yeah. Simple and I think very actionable. So where can people go to learn more about you or any content that you want to share with people, anything for people to check out? Please feel free to mention whatever it is you want.
Sure. Well, can I start by offering you a PDF of that Sylvia Ann Hewlett thing?
Yes.
And I can send it to you, and then you can post it for your listeners?
Sure.
Great. So I'm going to do that. That's one thing. I run a company called Essential Communications, and our website is essentialcomm with 2 M's, essentialcomm.com. So look, I've been podcasting since 2008, Jacob.
Yeah,
there's a lot
time
on my website. Yeah, right. It's a long time. So there's lots there, lots of resources for free. Please do it. And the podcast is called The Look and Sound of Leadership.
Very cool. Well, Tom, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to chat with me about executive presence. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. What a pleasure.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. And thanks everyone for tuning in. My guest, again, Tom Henschel. Make sure to check out his podcast as well. It's called The Look and Sound of Leadership Podcast. And I will see all of you next time. Thanks for watching. And if you want more content just like this, please remember to subscribe to the YouTube channel. And if you want to find out if you are a future-ready leader, if you have the skills and mindsets to lead in the new world of work, you can take my assessment at futureleadersurvey.com. That's futureleadersurvey.com.